Hey everybody, my name is Jim Farmer. I'm the festival director of Out on Film, Atlanta's LGBTQ Film Festival. This is our 36th year of bringing you stories for, by, and about our community. And we have a really strong lineup this year. One of the films that we're showing, which is a US premiere, is Gerald McCullough's Stuck in Greece, an LGBTQ refugee crisis. I'm going to read a brief description of the film, and then we're going to jump into some questions with Gerald. When brought to Athens, Greece in 2016 for a screening of his film Daddy, filmmaker Gerald McCullough unexpectedly meets a group of LGBTQ refugees fleeing persecution from their communities, their governments, and their own families, who now find themselves trapped in Greece. Confounded by their circumstances, he is compelled to document his education of a crisis facing countless members of his community who came to Greece under desperately different circumstances. Gerald, we are so very happy to have this film in our schedule this year. Thanks for talking to us.
It's awesome, Jim. Um, I love your festival. You always program a solid festival. And after tonight, my I'm gonna babble for just a second and give you some praise.
Okay, thank
Uh,
you.
my two previous docs were sold immediately to my distributor,
Yeah.
and my kind of a groundwork that I laid with them was that I wanted those films to, and they didn't do the festival circuit. And I said, you can release these once they're done, but please let Out on Film screen them before they're distributed.
Thank you so
And
much.
so after tonight, Out on Film will be the only film festival around the world to have played all four of my feature films in the same theater that I used to watch movies in when I was graduating from Georgia State. So it is the coolest experience for me. It's a great coming home. And for this to be the US premiere.
Oh, great.
And this theater shares the parking lot where my post-production sound design happened in that mid-rise. So I saw you the day that I wrapped this film and sent you the link, and you and Craig and I went to dinner in that parking lot where I had just finished post-production like 2 months ago. So this is great. And you run a great festival year after year.
Thank you for the kind words. You have to tell this story tonight because Craig is doing the moderating for the live.
I will. I told him yesterday that I'll be propping
you there. So I mean, again, we're very excited about showing this film and obviously working with you over the years. But just tell us more about being in Greece at the time and sort of literally stumbling onto this story.
I did stumble onto it. I didn't expect. So the world of film festivals, is amazing, and it's a great, unique way to travel the world and meet people, and the only common ground you have is this film you've made. So yes, I did go with my film Daddy, and I had been traveling for about a year nonstop, which is amazing. And when I knew that Athens was kind of the last of a long line of festivals. So I had a month off, and I was gonna take my month, and island hop and as a middle-aged gay man, really have fun in Greece. And right before my screening, I attended a panel of LGBTQ refugees from various Middle Eastern countries who were escaping honor killings and torture and rape and death threats from ISIS, Taliban, right before my screening of Daddy. And I was blown away by these stories, and I had no idea this crisis even existed.
Yeah.
I didn't even think, as a middle-aged gay man, that so many of these refugees that are just given a blank state, kind of a blank, a very wide blanket statement, the one community, that there's so many different people inside that community. And I never thought like, oh, wow, part of my community exists within this blanket statement of refugees.
And that's one of the points that comes across so well at the very beginning of this. Is like a lot of people don't realize that, some of these refugees are part of our community, LGBTQ.
Many of them are, and they're running from things we may have heard about through our lives, but these are their realities, and the torture and horrors that these such brave individuals have gone through, and leaving everything they know alone with a backpack. Yeah. The smugglers don't let you get on those boats with anything.
Yeah.
And they arrive, especially the transgender community, who are thrown off of these boats because the same people they're running from are the same people that are escaping these countries as well. So they
Yeah.
pay a smuggler, they're thrown on these boats. Many of them who can't swim drown because they're
Yes.
those people on those boats don't accept them and they are thrown off.
Yeah.
And as a transgender human being, when you arrive on a boat with a backpack, you know, it's, and they can't stay in the camps because the camps are filled with the same people they're running from, the same people from the boats. It's it was harrowing,
Yeah.
and I was beyond inspired by their resilience
Yeah.
and their courage. And throughout this whole process of meeting these people, I just kept thinking like, wow, could I have done that?
Yeah.
Could I have left everything I knew
Yeah.
and moved to,
Sure.
been, and they're displaced for years.
Yeah.
The asylum process is not easy. LGBT people are not, QIA plus, are not considered a high risk community.
Yeah.
Single women and kids are. So they are given a fast track through the asylum process.
Let me.
So, which is a 2-3 year process. So these people cannot live in the camps. They have to find some way to survive for 2.5, 3 years. They can't work. Many go into the sex trade. It's harrowing, and it's a reality that I didn't even know existed for countless people of our community. And I was blown away. So back to the story, I apologize.
Yeah.
After the panel, luckily being one of the US filmmakers that was brought to Athens,
Yeah.
as you guys do, we're treated very well. And the US Embassy had thrown a nice little luncheon before my screening. And so I went with people from the embassy to this panel. And halfway through it, I pulled out my iPhone and I started recording this panel. And then turned to these people from the embassy and I said, can you, I'm here for a month. Like, can you introduce me to these people? Can you find me a translator? Can I meet them and document my education of this? I had no idea this was happening. And that's how it began. I mean, it began there, me pulling out my iPhone and recording this panel and then meeting these people. And when I realized what the story was, our vocabulary, the initialism of LGBTQIA plus has evolved. So much of their conversation when they refer to themselves as LGBT. So at that point, QIA plus hadn't really evolved into the vernacular that it is now.
Yeah.
So it was very important to me that, okay, if I'm going to make this as a middle-aged gay guy, I was like, okay, this is not going to be a bunch of attractive men. I wanted to represent each of those initials in the initialism of LGBT. So it was very important to me that a variety of voices was represented. Exactly. So before I really knew I had a film, I was like, I have got to find people who don't have an immense language barrier, people or find a translator that could introduce me to the community that I needed to meet. All these people basically living underground, in the shadows of Athens. And hearing their stories was life-changing.
So let me ask you this. Can you talk a little bit about how hard it is for these subjects to leave home and put themselves in this position? I mean, can you just talk about they're basically giving up everything because they can't deal with their situation, but just talk a little bit about how harrowing that is and how it just affects them as they move forward.
Yes. And the courage that they need to make that happen. Travel alone, leave everything you knew, running for their lives. To pay a smuggler, I have refugees from Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, various Middle Eastern countries, North African countries, and many of their stories of why they left their home countries are in the film and are not only very sad to listen to, but are mind-blowing what these people are running from. And they leave alone. They don't have, it's, there's no community for them.
Yeah.
And they pay a smuggler to get them, to Turkey, which is also not a safe place. Although what we may think of Istanbul, or like it's not safe at all. Then they pay a smuggler. They get on a boat. They're brought to some Greek island, whatever Greek island they can reach. There's not only Lesbos, there's other countries, other Greek islands. And basically they're told they can't stay in the camps because they will, face the same things they're running from.
Yeah.
So they have to somehow get to Athens, the only real safe haven for this community, this refugee community within the larger refugee community. That when I started filming, there weren't even NGOs established specifically for this community.
Oh, geez.
It was I did this at the height of the refugee crisis. I
Yeah.
began filming this. I filmed this content over 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 4 years of going back and forth to Greece, 2 years in post-production. Yeah, and you cannot get on one of these boats with anything more than one personal item, like a backpack. Can you imagine? And these kids are 17, 18,
Oh,
19,
I was about
20.
to say they're young. I mean, they're, yeah.
Yeah, before they're, thrown into forced marriages.
Yeah.
So they're running at that age. I just can't imagine the courage it takes to leave everything to
Exactly.
make it to a country trying to access somewhere in the EU,
Yeah.
and Greece from Turkey is the closest EU country.
Yeah.
Having to learn a new language to get by, like it was confounding to me what the specifics of what they had to go through to make this happen. I don't even know if I answered your question. I'm so sorry.
My question. How did you, obviously, on the panel that you were at, you sort of started learning more about this, but how did you go about piecing together who all of your subjects were going to be, and how hesitant, I mean, how hesitant were some of these subjects to talk about this, especially?
Many had never talked about their stories with anyone ever
Yeah.
before. So it was really emotional.
Okay.
No one knew who I was, and so initially it was a long process of establishing trust, getting to know them, finding places to, spend one-on-one time with many of
Yeah.
these people to get to know them, finding a place that we could film with my iPhone initially, some of this content. And I knew nothing about this initially. So I looked to them and their stories to educate me. And it was really me just recording. Once this trust was established, I just recorded everything. I went back and forth over 4 years, multiple times, not only Greece, but also to Sweden, to Berlin, where some of them finally get.
Yeah.
And I end up with like 50 hours of footage that I mined down to this hour and 40-minute film.
So,
And I just recorded everything because it was all new to me. And and through a year process of watching that 50 hours of footage, did I that content dictated what the film was going to be, and to find that narrative within that 50 hours.
exactly.
And sadly, not all the people I spent time with are represented in the film.
Yeah.
Many of these harrowing stories were not singular. So many people had the same exact stories, and it was mind-blowing. But as a filmmaker, I couldn't just have redundant, repetitive information. I needed the story to move forward.
Exactly.
So yeah. So sadly, not everyone is in the film, and their stories are just as important as the ones that are represented in the film.
Sure.
And it was heartbreaking to me that these
Exactly.
opened their lives to me, and I couldn't represent their voices in the movie. That was the hardest thing to do.
Exactly. So you were in Greece, thinking that you had a month of just free time to explore and go to islands and everything. And then the filmmaker in you was intrigued by this. But when did, and you started filming, but when did you you shot this on your phone, and then later you went.
initially.
When did you say, wow, I need to tell their stories. I want to do this film no matter how long it takes. When did that take over?
Well, before I went to Greece, I had already sold my first documentary about the iconic Atlanta gay strip club, Swingin' Richards. I had already sold that to my distributors of Daddy. So I
Okay.
was already obligated to make that movie when I was in Greece, which luckily did very well. And there was another movie that I sold. So during this time of recording and gaining this content, I was already obligated to make two other films. Uh, so I didn't know if this film would have a life. And because I was obligated to make those two films, I was like, will this crisis even be relevant in 3 years when I can finally make this movie? And I also knew that I had to keep going back to Greece. I had to give my subject matters time for their lives to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I mean, as I said, I didn't know if I had a movie, and I just recorded everything I could. And uh, the stories were so shocking and so harrowing that and they had opened up their lives to me. I just had such a responsibility to make this thing happen. I couldn't let these voices go unheard.
Exactly.
And so in the midst of making two other movies, I would keep going back to Greece.
Mhm.
And luckily now with social media, I can stay in their lives. I'm still in many of their lives. I have such respect for these people.
Yeah.
And it's an honor to bring their stories to the global platform
That's
of
great.
film festivals and everything. I don't know, again, if I answered your question. I'm so sorry.
Um, I sort of forgot my question now, but what I was going to ask you, I guess, you know, what some people don't realize is that for these refugees who were basically in limbo as they sort of await their future, not knowing what their future is and how long it's going to take, I guess a lot of people don't realize that this is not something that happens overnight. This can be a very long process, and for some of these people, it's still continuing. Can you talk a little bit about how they adapt to that and the challenge of how they have to adapt to being here with an uncertain future, not just not having to acclimate to their surroundings, but literally not knowing how long they're going to be there, not knowing how long this process is going to take.
Not knowing where their next meal is coming from.
Exactly.
They arrive with a backpack. They don't have clothes. They don't have access. It's hard for every refugee. It's
Yeah.
it's complicated and detailed and a years long process. But they don't have access to a lot of things that people do have in the camps:
Yeah.
clothing, food, shelter, bathrooms, because they're all on the streets. They will, each day to them is a life and death situation. So uh, their resiliency and their humanity, I guess, and their hope for safety in the future is what keeps them going. But I will say that many of these quote unquote unsafe countries where they're running from are deemed as safe countries in the EU. So 99% of LGBTQIA plus refugees that identify as that community, 99% are rejected and forced either to go underground or forced back to their home countries where they face the same things they're running from. It's very harrowing. 99% are not accepted.
I guess
It's crazy.
I guess my question to you is I don't know what this is. This little I have an emoji that I didn't start. It's so weird. Um
Well, I hope it's a good emoji.
it was a thumbs up. I was like, where's I didn't hit that anyway. So do you feel like so much of this film is about obviously these subjects and their journeys and what they're dealing with and what they're having to face, but you can't ignore the political undertones of this as well, especially at this time in our country, in the world. But I mean, do you feel like this situation is getting any better now, any worse, or is it pretty much the same as it was when you first started encountering
It
them?
is getting better. You know, since I started filming this, many NGOs, non-government organizations, have evolved that specifically focus on the LGBTQIA plus community of refugees.
Yeah.
That didn't happen initially. So there, and some of my refugees, not my refugees, some of the people in the movie during the filming formed their own NGO. And that NGO, which is now called Amantis, still exists. Some of the refugees featured in my film are on that board. It was officially honored by the EU as an official NGO since I started filming. Uh, some of them have become very active in the global refugee crisis. Uh, one, Suma, who I have such respect for, a transgender Egyptian refugee, spoke at World Pride. She was invited to speak on a panel at the EU, and they're all giving a voice to this and raising the awareness. People, now that social media has evolved, one of the people featured in the film has begun. There is a Instagram live chat he does with much of his community in their home countries as they're fleeing, trying to educate them from their own personal journeys of what these people need to expect, what they need to run from, what they need to be aware of in this process.
Exactly. How,
Um,
how are you? Do you still stay in touch
I
with?
do.
Okay.
I do. Many of them know that the film's having its
Okay.
US premiere tonight. Uh,
Nice.
it has world premiere 3 weeks ago
Okay.
in Greece at the International Documentary Film Festival in Crete,
Yeah.
which wasn't even a LGBT specific film festival. So that meant a lot. And I was actually kind of scared going there, not knowing what the Greek community would think of my movie, because it was important to me to show the Greece that these people are living through, which is not the Acropolis. It's not all these tourist destinations we go to. It is a different visual terrain of Greece and of Athens.
Yeah.
And through social media, I am in touch with many of them, and I just
Great.
got back from reuniting with many of the people, not only in the film, but people that helped me throughout this process of making the film. And luckily the film won 2 freaking awards. I won a jury award and
Congratulations.
it's best international documentary feature.
Yeah.
And that was mind blowing to me. And to get to share that news with these people who opened up their lives to me was
Exactly.
the most rewarding thing I've ever done. It was such, sadly, a celebration. Many of them are still stuck in Greece.
Yeah.
Some have moved on. And to share the fact that I'm finally bringing their stories, to a public audience, and that we were acknowledged with a few awards was
Great.
a wonderful thing to share with them.
Congratulations. Final question. Obviously, we've had a history of working with you very successfully. I mean,
I love that history.
great. You've been great. I mean, it's been wonderful working with you and celebrating you and your work over the years. But can you talk a little bit, because I know that when we first started working with you, you were predominantly an actor, a performer, and you've very successfully segued into directing. Um, is that something that you ever envisioned? And can you sort of talk about that journey?
Yeah, I was very lucky to, a show that I was on, CSI, for 10 years. Spending that much time on a set and working with as many directors as I did, I've spent so much of my life on sets. I was like, I can, and I'm not saying I'm so appreciative of my career and the fact that I've been able to do this for so long. I'm old. I'm not a young actor anymore.
Stop
And
it.
luckily, I've gotten to evolve as a human being and as an actor over these years.
Yeah.
But as an actor, you're always kind of a puppet. You know,
Mhm.
it's not a story you necessarily want to tell. You don't know how it's going to be edited. You don't know what's going to remain in the movie. And I realized through luckily being fortunate to have spent so much time on sets over my life, I was like, I can do this. I have stories I want to tell. Why not? And I was lucky enough with the success of CSI that in my third season, I made my first film, a short film that I didn't get to screen at your festival because it played the Atlanta Film Festival. And I'm sorry about that. But that kind of set me, the response to that short film was really wonderful. And I got to travel the world. And I was like, this is an amazing way to tell stories and not just feel like I am filling a hole, of a cast. And I got to tell stories I wanted to tell. And my first feature film, after making my short film, I would spend my hiatus from CSI in New York doing off-Broadway plays.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 of the plays I did over 3 hiatus seasons, I optioned the rights to each of those plays and would work with the playwright in trying to see if this film of the story could evolve into a film script.
Yeah.
And Daddy was the first one that I felt was solid enough to do the horrible experience of raising money for and financially support as well myself. And as you know, as I just said earlier, Daddy led me to my distributors, who immediately purchased my idea about Swingin' Richards.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to the second stripper doc, and Stuck in Grease was sandwiched in between all that stuff. Sure. So it's been a 15-year ride of being a filmmaker, and one thing has led to the next. And Stuck in Grease, I guess, is the accumulation of all that, and when I made those stripper docs, Stuck in Grease was already in my noggin. I'd already started filming content. And I was like, if I can make 2 documentaries about strip clubs, I can certainly make a documentary about LGBTQIA plus refugees. Okay. So those were kind of my learning grounds. I didn't go officially to film school. I have taken many film classes at AFI over my years in LA, but I'm really a self-taught filmmaker. Thank God for YouTube. I learned so much on YouTube.
Exactly.
Stuck in Grease, I not only filmed and directed, but I edited that whole thing. So I don't know what's around the corner, but my journey as an actor, I still act. Luckily, I just did the second season of Physical on Apple Plus.
Nice.
Yeah, I've got a show on Netflix with Michelle Monaghan. So that keeps me going. That actually finances my filmmaking career. So I'm still grounded. And let me just say, I do want to acknowledge, I fully support the strike as a SAG-AFTRA member who got their union card in Atlanta when I was in college, and got my equity card in Atlanta as well. So the fact that I have roots there is amazing, but I do support and respect the strike. However, because Stuck in Grease is a documentary and filmed mostly in Greece, it's not under your union jurisdiction. So I am allowed to speak about this as the filmmaker. I'm not going against my union, and I do support the strike fully. I do want to say that.
Great. The film is Stuck in Grease, an LGBTQ refugee crisis. The filmmaker is our friend Gerald McCullough. Thank you so much for sharing this film with us. Thank you so much for taking the time. And we look forward, obviously, to working with you many years down the future.
I appreciate it. And I will say again, Jim, you consistently program one of the best festivals in the US. You guys, I'm going to plug you as well, were ranked last year by USA Today as one of the top 10 festivals. And that should be acknowledged. That is a huge success.
Can I correct you on that?
Oh.
We were ranked #1, but I'm not that I'm.
There you go. Even better. Even better. But you treat
correction purposes.
You treat filmmakers, you give us such focus and respect. It's really wonderful to be brought back to my hometown.
Oh, that's great.
Where I finished post-production on all of my feature films, and this coming home is a wonderful thing for me with each of my films. So thank you for supporting me.
Thank you
and my films and all these other filmmakers that you bring into town.
That's great.
I will tell you that in the indie filmmaking community, when we get into your program, we celebrate.
Oh, that's so nice. I mean,
program by you, it's a win.
That means so much. We love working with our filmmakers. Thank you so very much, and we'll see you tonight.
You're awesome.
Take care. Thanks.